Nickelodeon isn't just a TV channel. For anyone born between 1985 and 2010, it was a cultural architect. It was the place that taught us that being weird was a superpower, that adults don't always have the answers, and that a yellow kitchen sponge could be the funniest thing on the planet. But when we look back at the golden era, we usually just see nostalgia. We see the toys and the theme songs. Today, we're looking deeper. We're ranking the top 10 Nickelodeon shows of all time based on narrative structure, visual innovation, and psychological depth. We're looking at the shows that dared to be dark, the sitcoms that built a blueprint for a generation, and the one masterpiece that arguably stands as the greatest story ever told in the history of television. I'm going to be honest, this list isn't just a trip down memory lane, it's a defense of animation as a high art form. From the jazz-soaked streets of Hillwood to the Art Deco futurism of Tremorton, these are the shows that defined us. Before we count down to number 1, hit that subscribe button to join the Animated Memories community as we deconstruct the history of the shows you love. Now, let's get weird. To kick off our list at number 10, we have the show that proved Nickelodeon wasn't afraid to let things get weird. And I mean genuinely uncomfortable. I'm talking about Rocko's Modern Life. Looking back, it's a miracle this show was ever marketed to children. While other cartoons were busy with playground antics, Rocko was a high-speed collision of surrealism and existential dread. It was the adult cartoon for kids, a show that functioned as a survival guide for a world that makes absolutely no sense. The genius of Rocko lies in its chaotic art style. Everything in O-Town is crooked, slanted, and vibrating with an anxious energy that felt years ahead of its time. It wasn't just a design choice, it was a visual representation of the anxieties of adulthood. Whether Rocko was trying to navigate a predatory credit card company, the soul-crushing bureaucracy of the DMV, or just a bad day at the Conglomero Corporation, the show was constantly screaming that being an adult is a nightmare of absurdity. And we have to talk about the hidden adult humor. This show was the king of the how did they get away with that moment. From the subtle, choky chicken references to the blatantly suggestive sight gags, the writers were playing a dangerous game with the censors. But that wink and a nod writing is exactly why it holds up so well today. It wasn't just gross-out humor, it was sophisticated satire wrapped in a neon-colored fever dream. Rocko's Modern Life earns its spot because it prepared an entire generation for the messy, nonsensical reality of the real world. It taught us that life is loud, people are strange, and sometimes you're just a wallaby in a shirt covered in triangles trying to keep your head above water. It was bold, it was biting, and it remains one of the smartest things to ever come out of the 90s Nicktoons era. Moving to number 9, we transition from the surreal chaos of Rocko to something much more quiet, much more grounded, and infinitely more soulful. Hey Arnold. If most Nicktoons were a sugar rush, Hey Arnold was a late-night jazz record. It didn't just entertain kids, it respected them. The show functioned as a grounded urban drama, trading in wacky slapstick for a moody, atmospheric depiction of city life that felt lived in and real. The secret sauce here is the jazz atmosphere. Between Jim Lang's iconic lo-fi soundtrack and the hazy, sunset-stained streets of Hillwood, the show captured a specific kind of urban melancholy. It wasn't just a background, it was a character. This setting allowed the show to tackle themes that most cartoons were too terrified to touch. Things like poverty, broken homes, and generational trauma. But you can't talk about this show without talking about the depth of its ensemble, specifically Helga Pataki. Helga isn't just a bully archetype, she is one of the most complex, tragic characters in animation history. Her home life is a masterclass in depicting emotional neglect, making her obsession with Arnold feel less like a crush and more like a desperate search for light in a dark world. Every side character, from Stoop Kid to Mr. Hyun, was treated with dignity. The show understood that everyone in the city has a story, and most of those stories are bittersweet. It balanced the crushing weight of loneliness with a persistent, quiet sense of hope. Arnold himself wasn't a superhero, he was a football-headed philosopher whose only power was his ability to listen and help people find their humanity. Hey Arnold earns its place because it was mature enough to let scenes breathe, and brave enough to let episodes end on a pensive note rather than a joke. It remains the gold standard for how to tell a human story in a medium often dismissed as being just for kids. At number 8, we're going back to the sandbox for the show that didn't just define a decade, it redefined how we see the world. I'm talking about the undisputed cornerstone of the 90s, Rugrats. The true genius of Rugrats lies in its masterclass of perspective. Most shows are about characters interacting with their environment, but Rugrats was about characters reimagining their environment. It took the mundane, boring objects of adult life, a vacuum cleaner, a basement, or a trip to the grocery store, and transformed them into epic, high-stakes adventures. To a baby, the world is giant, terrifying, and full of mystery, and the show used that ground-level camera work to make us feel exactly what Tommy and the gang felt. We also have to credit the legendary Klasky Csupo art style. In an era where cartoons were starting to look clean and symmetrical, Rugrats was proudly ugly. The character designs were lumpy, the lines were shaky, and the colors were often muted and strange. But that grotesque aesthetic gave the show its tactile soul. It felt like real life, messy and imperfect, which made the imaginative segments pop even more by comparison. But beneath the diaper and dinosaur exterior, the show was anchored by its focus on family dynamics. Whether it was Stu's middle-aged burnout in the basement, Chucky's struggle with anxiety after losing his mother, or the complicated rivalry with Angelica, the show was deeply human. It balanced pure, childlike wonder with the quiet realities of parenting, making it a rare bridge that kids and adults could walk across together. Rugrats earns this spot because it taught us that you don't need a spaceship or a magic wand to have an adventure. You just need a screwdriver, a few friends, and a limitless imagination. It wasn't just a 90s classic, it was a psychological study of childhood itself, wrapped in the most iconic art style of its generation. Dropping in at number 7 is the show that proved Nickelodeon could play in the big leagues of the action-adventure genre. It's the perfect genetic hybrid of teen angst and supernatural heroism, Danny Phantom. If Spider-Man taught us that with great power comes great responsibility, Danny Phantom taught us that great power usually comes with a massive side of social humiliation. This show was the perfect blend of high school drama and superhero epic, managing to balance the crushing weight of algebra and puberty with the literal weight of saving the world from extra-dimensional threats. Visually, this was Butch Hartman at the absolute top of his game. The character designs were sharp, geometric, and bursting with personality. But the real star was the cool factor of the Ghost Zone. It wasn't just a generic bad guy dimension. It was a neon-soaked, imaginative landscape filled with unique lore and some of the most creative villains in the Nick catalog. From the rock star energy of Ember McLean to the chilling, calculated threat of Vlad Plasmius. What set Danny Phantom apart was that the stakes felt genuine. Unlike the episodic nature of other shows, Danny was constantly dealing with the escalating consequences of his double life. The show mastered the secret identity trope by showing us the cost of the lie, how it strained his relationship with his ghost-hunting parents and isolated him from everyone except Sam and Tucker. It wasn't just about punching ghosts. It was about a kid trying to build an identity while his literal DNA was being pulled in two different directions. It gave us a hero who was vulnerable, sarcastic, and incredibly easy to root for. It took the classic superhero formula, infused it with a sleek, modern edge, and created an evolution of the genre that remains one of the most exciting things Nickelodeon ever aired. Coming in at number 6, we have a show that is arguably the most visually distinct project in the history of the network. It's a rhythmic, neon-lit masterpiece called My Life as a Teenage Robot. If you want to talk about style over everything, this is the conversation. My Life as a Teenage Robot didn't just look good, it looked expensive. The show utilized a breathtaking Art Deco aesthetic, a retro future look that felt like a 1930s vision of the year 2000. It was flat, geometric, and strikingly beautiful, making every frame look like a piece of high-end concept art. But beneath that sleek, robotic exterior was a brilliant subversion of the superhero genre. Our protagonist, Jenny Wakeman, or XJ9, is a literal weapon of mass destruction designed to protect the Earth. But all she actually wants is to go to the mall and fit in. It's the ultimate metaphor for the teenage experience, feeling like a high-functioning machine built for a purpose you didn't choose, while just wanting the freedom to be normal. The show thrived on this tension between duty and desire. Jenny was caught between her mother, a literal mad scientist who saw her as a project, and her friends, who saw her as a person. This gave the show an emotional weight that grounded its high-octane action. And the action was top tier. Because Jenny was a robot, the animators could push her physical limits in ways a human character couldn't touch, leading to some of the most imaginative and fluid combat sequences on the channel. It combined the cool factor of a sci-fi epic with the heart of a coming-of-age story, all wrapped in a visual package that still hasn't been matched. It was imaginative, it was stylish, and it remains a cult classic for anyone who appreciates animation as a true art form. Cracking the top 5, we're stepping away from the animation cells and into the golden age of the multicam sitcom. If you grew up in the mid-2000s, this wasn't just a show, it was a cultural event. I'm talking about the peak of Nickelodeon's live-action era, Drake and Josh. Before the Schneiderverse became a meme, Drake and Josh was a masterclass in comedic architecture. While other live-action shows were trying to be edgy or cool, this show leaned into the oldest, most reliable trick in the book, the odd couple dynamic. You had the cool, effortlessly charismatic musician versus the high-strung, hyper-organized nerd. It's a trope as old as time, but Drake Bell and Josh Peck executed it with a level of chemistry and comedic timing that you simply don't see in teen TV anymore. The show worked because it respected the art of the physical gag. Whether it was the game sphere, the Demonator, or just the legendary back-and-forth banter, every episode was built on a foundation of slapstick that felt like a modern-day Laurel and Hardy. They weren't just reading lines, they were performing a choreographed dance of frustration and brotherhood. And let's be real, Drake and Josh owns the catchphrase Hall of Fame. Hug me, brother. I do not control the speed at which lobsters die, and the simple, devastating power of Megan. These weren't just jokes. They became the blueprint for every teen sitcom that followed. Every show from iCarly to Victorious was trying to replicate the specific energy of this living room. But what really anchors it at number 5 is that beneath the spherical jokes and the sibling pranks, there was a genuine heart. It was a show about two polar opposites who actually grew to love each other as brothers. It was funny, it was endlessly quotable, and it represents a time when Nick's live action felt like prestige comedy for a younger audience.
Coming in at number 4, we have the show that didn't just entertain the internet generation, it actually predicted it. Long before content creator was a legitimate career path, there was iCarly. It is impossible to overstate how ahead of its time iCarly actually was. We are currently living in a world dominated by influencers, streamers, and viral challenges, but Dan Schneider and his team were documenting that digital frontier back in 2007. iCarly was a prophetic look at the influencer era before the term even existed. It captured the exact moment the gatekeepers of traditional media started to lose their power to 3 kids with a high-definition camera and a dream. The show perfectly distilled the spirit of the early internet. This was the era of random humor, the pear phone, the spaghetti tacos, and the bizarre sketch comedy segments of the show within a show. It leaned into the chaotic, lo-fi energy of early YouTube, making Carly, Sam, and Freddie feel like the first true digital celebrities for kids. They weren't distant movie stars. They felt like friends you could actually interact with, which is the exact parasocial blueprint that modern YouTubers use today. But beyond the tech, the chemistry of the trio was the engine that made it work. You had Carly as the straight man, Sam as the chaotic force of nature, and Freddie as the technical backbone, the original producer archetype. Their dynamic made the idea of making stuff with your friends look like the coolest thing in the world. It turned a Seattle loft into a creative hub and made going viral the ultimate goal. iCarly earns its spot because it was the first show to realize that the internet wasn't just a hobby, it was a lifestyle. It gave a generation the vocabulary for the digital world they were about to inherit. It was funny, it was weird, and it was a terrifyingly accurate crystal ball for the future of entertainment.
We are entering the top 3, and things are about to get weird. At number 3, we have The Black Sheep of Nickelodeon, a show so chaotic, so dark, and so visually aggressive that it's honestly a miracle it ever shared a time slot with Rugrats. I'm talking about the beautiful nightmare that is Invader Zim. To understand why Invader Zim is a dark masterpiece, you have to look at its creator, Jonan Vasquez. Coming from the world of underground indie comics, Vasquez brought a twisted, sharp-edged art style to Nickelodeon that looked like nothing else on the planet. Everything in Zim's world is jagged, filthy, and bathed in a palette of neon purples and industrial grays. It didn't just look different, it looked hostile. The show's real genius, however, was its cynical, hilarious view of humanity. In the world of Invader Zim, humans aren't the heroes. They are loud, disgusting, and incredibly oblivious. The show turned the typical alien invasion trope on its head. Zim isn't a terrifying conqueror, he's an incompetent egomaniac. And the only person who sees the truth, Dib, is treated like a lunatic. It was a biting satire of society, consumerism, and human stupidity, wrapped in a layer of sci-fi horror. What's fascinating is that the show's early cancellation only made its legacy stronger. It became the ultimate cult classic. Because it was cut short, it never had the chance to get stale or lose its edge.
It exists as this concentrated burst of pure, unfiltered creative madness. Even 20 years later, the industry still hasn't caught up. No other network has had the guts to greenlight something this unapologetically grotesque and funny at the same time. It earns the number 3 spot because it pushed the boundaries of what kids' TV could be. It was loud, it was mean, and it was brilliant. Invader Zim wasn't just a show, it was a counterculture movement inside a corporate network.
At number 2, we have the undisputed heavyweight champion of pop culture, the show that turned a yellow kitchen sponge into a global icon and changed the DNA of internet humor forever. It is, of course, SpongeBob SquarePants. To call SpongeBob a cartoon is an understatement. It is a comedic miracle. Specifically, the golden era, those first 3 seasons and the 2004 movie, represents some of the tightest, most inventive writing in the history of television. This was the era of nautical nonsense at its absolute peak, where the show found a way to be simultaneously wholesome, absurd, and incredibly clever. The reason SpongeBob works so well is that it's built on perfect character archetypes. You have the eternal optimist in SpongeBob, the cynical realist in Squidward, and the pure, unadulterated chaos of Patrick Star. These aren't just funny characters, they are universal personality types. It's why the humor works for a 5-year-old and a 50-year-old at the exact same time. Kids laugh at the physical slapstick, while adults are laughing because they've finally realized that they are Squidward, just trying to play their clarinet in a world that won't stop screaming. But the real proof of its genius is its status as the most memed show in history. SpongeBob is the universal language of the internet. Because the character expressions are so exaggerated and the situations are so relatable, there is a SpongeBob frame for every possible human emotion. The show's DNA is woven into how we communicate today. It was a lightning in a bottle moment where Steven Hillenburg's background in marine biology met a surrealist comedic sensibility. It's a show that can find humor in a bubble, a cardboard box, or a rock. It's timeless. It's infinite, and while it might have stayed on the air a little too long, those early years are untouchable. It is the face of Nickelodeon, and it would be number 1 on almost any other list if it weren't for the masterpiece that's coming up next.
This is it, the undisputed peak. At number 1, we have the show that didn't just move the bar for Nickelodeon, it broke the bar and rebuilt it into a monument of modern fiction. We are talking about the masterpiece, Avatar: The Last Airbender. There are great cartoons, and then there is Avatar. To call this a kids show is like calling the Mona Lisa a sketch. From the very first frame, Avatar was playing a different game. This is long-form storytelling at its absolute zenith, a 61-episode odyssey that was planned with a level of surgical precision usually reserved for prestige HBO dramas. The world-building here is staggering. By grounding the magic of the 4 elements in real-world martial arts and philosophy, the creators built a universe that felt lived-in, ancient, and consequential. Bending wasn't just a cool power set, it was a cultural, political, and spiritual framework that dictated the fate of nations. But the reason this show sits on the throne is its thematic maturity. Avatar had the courage to look children in the eye and talk to them about genocide, imperialism, and the crushing weight of destiny. And we cannot talk about this show without mentioning the Zuko redemption arc. Let's be clear, this isn't just a good arc, it is the greatest redemption story in the history of television. Watching a scarred, angry antagonist slowly deconstruct his own identity to find his own path is a masterclass in character writing that rivals The Sopranos or Breaking Bad. Every character, from Aang's struggle with pacifism to Toph's revolutionary strength, is written with a soul. There is no filler here. Every detour, every joke, and every tear leads to a finale that is as emotionally satisfying as it is epic. Avatar: The Last Airbender earns the top spot because it proved that animation has no ceiling. It is a perfect story about the balance of the world and the balance of the self. It's a show that stays with you long after the credits roll, teaching us that even in our darkest moments, hope is something you give yourself. It isn't just the best show Nickelodeon ever produced, it is one of the greatest stories ever told.
So there it is, the 10 shows that didn't just fill our Saturday mornings, they filled our heads with ideas, our hearts with empathy, and our sense of humor with a healthy dose of the absurd. Whether you are a 90s kid navigating the streets of Hillwood, or a 2000s kid witnessing the return of the Avatar, we all shared a version of this golden era. Now, I know what you're thinking. How could I leave out the Fairly Odd Parents? Where is Ren and Stimpy? Why isn't SpongeBob number 1? And honestly, that's the point. Nickelodeon's legacy is so massive that no 10 spots can ever truly hold it all. So, I'm passing the torch to you. Drop your untouchable top 3 in the comments below. Let's see which shows really defined your childhood. If you appreciated this deep dive into the vault, hit that like button and subscribe to Animated Memories. We're just getting started exploring the stories that made us who we are today. Thanks for watching. Stay weird, stay creative, and I'll see you in the next one.